your awareness of those leading indicators and the strength of the opportunities you're discussing will really be a really good telltale sign for me and for sales managers to understand how well this salesperson knows how to spend their time and to invest in a deal.
A qualified solicitor, you started your own company, and also you have been a sales leader for many different companies now. So what are your main philosophies as a VP of sales, and how do you think your career has impacted this philosophy?
Great question. Thank you for the background. And actually, I think the background ties in very, very heavily to some of my philosophies and how I approach my work. And I refer back to my days as a solicitor, which I won't go into the story now, but all kind of happened by accident or undeliberately. I didn't enjoy it. I really didn't enjoy my life, my work then, despite it being a very prestigious role, very well paid role, prestigious firm, deals on the front page of the Financial Times that I was involved in. I had that sick feeling on a Sunday evening about the thought of going into work and doing 5 days the week ahead. And I made a promise to myself then that I will always enjoy the job that I do. And I'm not naive enough to say that every day is going to be a good day. You have good days, you have bad days. But if you have that sick feeling on a Sunday evening at the thought of the week ahead, you're in the wrong job. And I think that's a philosophy I take in as a sales leader to say, your work should be enjoyable. Again, not every day. You'll have bad days, you'll have bad moments, you'll have bad experiences, but you've got to think about your job as a positive thing in your life. You spend the majority of your waking hours doing it, so it should be enjoyable. So I put a lot of that into how can we make life more fun? And in sales particularly, it's a lot of rejection. It's a lot of being ignored. It's a lot of people letting you down. And that's a really kind of challenging type of behavior to deal with. So how, despite those challenges, do you make it fun, enjoyable? And that's about not just the environment, making it, like, excuse the cliche, like a startup, fun and enjoyable and, exciting, but actually fulfilling as well, that people feel like they're growing and learning and developing. So this is kind of my core philosophy around work in whatever I do. I think when it comes to specifically the teams that I run, I'm really focused on developing a culture of excellence. And I think I'm unapologetic about that. Because again, this is tied to the previous point about having fun. But if you insist on excellence and can maintain a culture of fun and enjoyability, then what you're doing is you're really developing a great team who enjoy getting better. And I'm, again, aware that people make mistakes, people learn. I know at Paddle, we hire really young, inexperienced people. Of course, I'm not expecting them to come in on day one and deliver as if they've been doing this for 5 years. But it's about the focus, about the ambition, about the motivation to say, I want to always be better than yesterday. It's absolutely fine to make a mistake, but make it once and learn from those mistakes and always be doing better. The final thing that I guess I'm really focused on with my team, and again, it's a bit of a football analogy, but I always think about football teams prior to COVID, when you had fans in the stadiums, developing a fortress in their home ground, right? And when away teams come to your home ground, they come into your fortress, into your backyard. And I want my team to feel like we're building a fortress. If you're in the inside of my team, we will look after you, not just professionally, where we'll create career development and progress and feedback and hopefully enrich you kind of financially and non-financially, but personally as well, to care about you, to look after you, to say, if you need a few days off, I don't need a reason why. Go and take it, because I trust that we have each other's backs. And that's something, again, that I think really breeds that loyalty and breeds that enjoyment as well. So I guess to sum it all up, there's a lot of sales leaders who focus on philosophies around how they go about the technical development or how they really focus on sales methodology. There's nothing wrong with that, but for me, it's all about people. You want to build an A-class business, you need A-class people. And that's what it's all about, people.
I love that. That is really amazing. So all about people. Okay. And so how do you actually find the right people? Is it about like knowing this person, maybe they might need a little bit of work, but they have that potential there? Or is it just finding an already developed team?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there is a right answer. I think everyone's got their own approach. And I think it's always about experimenting, you know, because you might have a highly developed and experienced salesperson who really does terribly at your work, and it's not the right environment, or it's not the right chemistry with the rest of the team, or they don't have the right attributes. So I think it starts with trying to be as objective as possible, as saying, what does a successful person look like in this business? You know, what are their hard skills? What are their soft skills? And how can we start identifying this through our recruitment process? And again, I tend to find that experience has less to do with this than people would naturally or intuitively think. In fact, we've seen it at Paddle, and we've developed this academy where we hire graduates. You know, we hire them in our most junior roles, but again, we've seen perhaps our most high-performing salespeople today with the graduates we hired 2-3 years ago, and put them through our academy initially as kind of SDRs, but progressing into the sales closing functions later. So I think it's really about making sure you're aware of what are the attributes of what excellence looks like for your team and for the roles you're hiring for, and then developing your hiring plan to say, well, what questions, what qualification points can we put into our recruitment process to really weed out or qualify out the people who perhaps don't fit into that. It's not always kind of black and white. There are always very, very gray areas, and so therefore ultimately what you're trying to do is make sure you're getting rid of bias in this process as well. Because, you know, I may have people coming in who talk about maybe a company that I've worked at in the past, or maybe they were a lawyer in their past life, or maybe they support the same football team. That's not really going to help me determine whether they're going to be good at this job or not. So I've got to, and we're constantly trying to improve on this, get rid of that bias, and really focus on these objective criteria that we've laid out for each role and our assessments against those.
That's a really great point. Okay, so that does lead me on very nicely to the question of metrics. What are the first 3 metrics that help you understand your sales team's performances, maybe individually or just as a whole?
I mean, I don't think I can limit this answer to 3, but I will try my best to try and group them together, if I may expand the scope of the question a little bit more. So I think that if you're thinking about the sales performance, ultimately you've got to look at that top of funnel. You've got to understand what is coming in into the pipeline, and if what we're really trying to do at Paddle is actually try and forecast what will be the future pipeline. So the pre-pipeline metrics, be that from sales outreach emails, you know, what's our response rates, what's our conversion rates through this kind of pre-opportunity funnel, from responding to engaging to kind of qualifying as an opportunity, or through the demand gen marketing funnel, be that through kind of how many times they visit the website to clicks, etc. It's really, really important that you've got a really good understanding based on how you've segmented your TAM, your total addressable market, to understand how things are performing, what your future pipeline is going to be. So that's the first one. It's a bit of a macro point, but I guess from the outreach side of things, it's really, really helpful in that respect. The other part that I'm thinking about is win rates, naturally. When we've got uniformity or at least some level of kind of benchmark around what our pipeline and our pre-opportunity funnel looks like, are all sales reps the same? No. You know, why are some sales reps boasting a 50-60% win rate and some are, you know, struggling around the 20-30% win rates? And I think it's really diving into those metrics and not just looking at them superficially and saying good, bad, but actually understanding, do they have a different territory? Do they have a different outreach approach? Are the leads and opportunities qualified in a different way? Are we talking to different personas within an account that lead to that? So again, it's really important to be aware of the metrics, but actually to understand what's driving them is far more fundamental to understand the reality and ultimately the change or optimizations needed there. The final one, which I think is probably the most important for a sales rep or bottom of the funnel there, is actually around forecast accuracy. So not just what your forecast is, because again, I was a sales rep and I was a junior sales rep once, and I fell into some very bad habits. Firstly, of not really appreciating how important forecasting was. Hey, I know where my deals are. Why do I need to represent this in Salesforce or whatever it was we used at the time? But actually, how well are they predicting what they're going to attain? Because I actually think if somebody were to ask me the most important character trait of a salesperson, it's self-awareness. You know, what am I saying? what am I doing right now? What am I not doing right now? And that interaction you have with prospects really helps shape and helps you understand what you need to be doing in order to achieve the desired result. Right? Everyone's got a target set for them, but your ability to attain or your forecast attainment against that target is something that's always going to move. So your awareness of those leading indicators and the strength of the opportunities you're discussing will really be a really good telltale sign for me and for sales managers to understand, how well this salesperson knows how to kind of spend their time and to invest in a deal. So those are probably the three groupings of metrics that I look at.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned forecasting. That's a quite unique metrics to follow, and it does make sense. It makes sense why having that awareness as a sales rep is so important. That's really great.
Absolutely. I think that just on that point, again, many sales leaders will focus on the forecast itself and say, hey, I need the salesperson to be at 3x of their target in their pipeline and in their forecast. I'm like, that's kind of a loaded ambition, right? Because if I was a sales rep in that team, I'd be like, all right, I need to get 3x of my pipeline in forecast. Am I going to be objective about it, right? The goal isn't necessarily to have that 3x or the 4x based on my conversion or win rates. That's the desired end. The goal is to have a realistic forecast. And then I know what I need to do in order to get to that 3x, 4x target in order to ensure that I hit my goal.
Makes sense. You want the forecast to actually work, don't you? And to be reliable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when the strategy has been set by the company, what would you say the first 3 things that you do? What do you think is super important in the first couple of steps?
So I think the first thing for me personally, and hopefully I've been involved in that setting of strategy as well, and certainly the sales team have been involved, but I think it's about, understanding it, and that will involve querying it, making sure that, again, I'm not worried about, it's sounding stupid by asking very basic questions that may make me seem quite simple. I've really got to believe in it. I've got to buy into this is the right strategy for us and it's an achievable strategy. And if I don't, I will continue to ask questions and be a thorn in people's sides. And that may not be a very personable trait, but that's what, my job is as an executive, as the representative of the sales organization, is to make sure this is something that we can buy into. Once that's achieved and I understand it, I've queried it, I believe in it, I then think about the dependencies. What does my team need and who else do they need around the organization in order to achieve these strategies and goals? Is it the sales operations or revenue operations team? Where do we rely on them? What about the demand generation function? These are naturally quite obvious ones, but thinking more about the tactics, what's our messaging? What is our TAM? What does the product need to change, or how do we position the product in order to achieve this strategy? So really thinking about who we need to take along the journey with us to make sure that we achieve our goals there, because things don't happen in a silo, even in a very small organization. And then the final part is aligning the team behind it. And again, it's a really, really big point, which I could talk about for hours. I won't. But it's, getting a team to believe in something is a lot harder than it sounds. I stand up in front of my sales team every single week, and I talk to them about where we're going and what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. And I get people nodding their heads, I get thumbs up. But do they actually believe it? Do they really, in their hearts? And every salesperson, when they lose a deal, when they get rejected or told where to go, doubt creeps in, right? So what it's really about is facilitating an environment where people themselves, regardless of their seniority or tenure in the business, can query, can challenge, can say, I'm not sure that's the right strategy. Because only once they're given that ability to ask and query and challenge, do they get to the point that I've got to, which is I understand and I believe it themselves. And hey, maybe they will raise a query or challenge a point that actually we say, oh, that's a really good point. We didn't think about that, right? So that's really, really important, that everyone feels that they've been involved in not just crafting it, but getting behind it and aligning behind it. Is they've got to feel that they're vested in the success of the outcome as well, and that it will be successful.
That's really great, because if they can see the VP asking those really basic questions and potentially sounding a little bit silly, they'll feel super comfortable to ask those questions as well and find out what they don't know. It's about that awareness that you're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely, but it's a challenge, right? Because even me saying, hey, ask me a question or query something that I've just said, I'm aware that, you know, some people who might be very, very new to the business or in their first job of their career may not want to stick their hand up and say, I think that's wrong. But that's the type of stuff that I want to hear. And I think it's been made a lot harder by, you know, the last 15 months or so, where we've been all on Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be. I generally find in a meeting of more than 10 people, I ask any questions, there are no questions. How do you create an environment where people feel comfortable to actually raise their hand? And that's where, again, my managers are really, really helpful, because they have one-on-ones with their teams. And I insist in those one-on-ones, spend some time talking about the strategy. Spend some time asking what that person really believes, and raise reservations, and share your own. Right? Because no one really knows 100% what outcomes are going to be. There's belief, there's planning, but you know, there's always a change of plan. So share your concerns, show that vulnerability, and facilitate that environment, and make sure that communication is free flowing.
So is that how you make your strategy become a lot more tactical? Make sure that they understand it, and there's a space for everyone to ask those questions, and have very frequent one-to-ones. What else do you do?
Yeah, so I think that comes back to the dependencies, right? So when you've mapped out those dependencies in roles or divisions within the organization, ultimately you've got to think about timelines and what each team needs to do to achieve them. I'll give you a great example. One of the things we're doing at Paddle at the moment is we're deliberately focusing on larger prospects, right? We're growing upstream, we're up market. And, you know, yes, I can work with my revenue operations team to identify bigger target accounts that we think are a good fit. And I can get the SDR team and the sales team who report into the sales organization focusing on those accounts and spending their time outreaching and trying to persuade them to join us. But actually, if we're going to do this at scale, it's a much more collaborative effort. And really, the left hand needs to know what the right hand's doing and acting in unison. And we also need to know where perhaps we are not so strong. So if our product perhaps is not such a great fit for businesses above a certain size, let's be aware of that. Let's make sure we're not targeting those, but let's give that feedback to product to say, hey, when are we going to be ready to service those clients? How long will that take? And this will actually determine, again, the type of messaging, our demand generation activities, our targeting, our talk tracks, our go-to-market today, but also helping us plan for the future. So again, it comes back to making sure that I'm aware what my marketing colleagues, what my colleagues in client success, product engineering, what they all have available to them, and have we got the right people in the team to ensure that we can successfully achieve the strategy.
That is really cool. And how do you actually go about doing that? Is it just the amount of contact you have with these departments, or like, what do you do?
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because everyone, and you know, the fashion is meetings, and you know, meetings are exceptionally, I think we're a lot better at it now than we were 12 months ago. But it's hard, and it's harder now to collaborate with people than when we were all in the office and say, hey, can we just jump into a meeting room for 30 minutes and hammer this out? So we've had to figure out things in the way through it. So I think the way we've done it at Paddle is we've talked about kind of ownership structures for initiatives. And that, you know, there is an ultimate owner of the strategy who delegates part of that strategy performance and delivery to different people. So of course, naturally, I would be responsible. I'd delegate responsibility to somebody in my team for the sales strategy. But it's about those owners coming together and making sure that they are all aware of each other's priorities, tactics, and kind of timelines over the coming days, weeks, and months. So clear communication, but kind of effective communication is going to be absolutely key there. So that if we are aware, hey, we've discovered something in our product and development side that actually we're 6 months further behind readiness to service this kind of segment of the market, that's really important for everyone else to know, right? You know, that shouldn't be kept in a silo and us only to find out because, you know, we suddenly hit this roadblock. That's something that needs to be surfaced and encouraged to be surfaced sooner. So it's about these structures and delegating out the responsibilities of how we actually kind of achieve this strategy. That's absolutely key, and that comes with that ownership and accountability.
That's great. So there's a structure, everyone knows what the timelines are, and everyone knows who has the ownership of the specific strategy or the project that you're doing, and then you all know exactly what's going on there.
100%.
That is really cool.
And just making sure that that is shared. We're big users of Slack, like many other organizations. And yeah, we are definitely guilty of having way too many Slack groups and private channels. But actually, on the flip side, it's a really, really helpful way of ensuring the right people have the right information in front of them. So that be that working through a Google document, or be that through some sort of recurring meeting that is shared and updated in terms of the outcomes and the next steps in Slack, that's something that we found to be really, really effective.
That is really cool. Right, so Adam, if you was in a room full of revenue leaders, I'm trying to figure out what your answer might be, trying to guess, because you have this really great ability, a really great awareness. What is the burning question you'd want an answer to?
I don't know if there's a burning question. I think if I'm in a room with successful revenue leaders, I think everyone's got their own story. And I think, again, back to what I like to think my career to date has been relatively successful, but I think that has come from taking a true interest in learning from every person I speak to. Even if they're not in sales, right? This is prospects, these are existing clients, these are networking events. And I think a lot of people are very good at feigning that interest. We've all had those cold calls where people call you up and say, hey, how's your day? But do they actually care how much it is? No, they don't. They want to make the sale. Can you detach yourself from that and actually say, I'm going to forget about the objective of this call, which is to sell you something, and actually, if it's selfish here, and say, I'm going to learn something by finding out about this person. Because, the more I work, the more I realize that I've got so much to learn. I know so little, and there are so many great people. And again, experience doesn't come into this. What makes this person tick? How is this person driven? What do they think about a certain challenge or objective or whatever it might be? And I think everyone, whether I agree with them or not, can share something and educate me and develop me in some way. So again, with revenue leaders who've been successful, I'd love to understand, what's made them so successful. Talk to me about some of those challenges you've had in your life and overcome them, because I bet some of them I'll have had myself, or I'm facing myself, or I will face. Some of them I may not face and may be very alien to me, but I'm sure there's still nuggets of value in terms of what they are saying to me that I can help learn and understand. So it is ultimately, if you boil it down, it's a selfish motivation. It's for my own development, but actually the key part is to have genuine interest and understanding in what this person is saying. And listening is a hard skill. Yeah, I can hear what you're saying and I can make notes and I can be racing ahead to see how my product can solve the pains that you're talking to me about. But what I'm saying is get that tunnel vision and take away all your ulterior motives and just really listen to this person, because everyone's got a really interesting story, whether they know it or not. And so really take the time to listen to somebody, try and learn what you can from them, because, from any background, any experience they have, there is something there for you to gain. So again, I'm sorry, I haven't directly answered your question and I've broadened it beyond the revenue leadership kind of forum, but I think that's something that's really, really important message that I don't feel people do well enough today. And be that in professional or personal life, and people are become more and more entrenched in their own views and their own experiences. Query yourself, query what you know is correct, because actually chances are there are lots of different ways and better ways and improvements that you can make that you can learn from other people.
That is great. Do you feel like you've always had this ability, or it came over time with all your experiences?
It's something I continuously have to remind myself. I'm quite a headstrong person historically, and I'm quite a determined person. So when I have an idea, first thing I've got to do is say to yourself, Adam, I know it's your idea, but is it a good idea? And then ask the question again and again. And really try and break it down. And I think, again, it's something that has come in time for me, which is this concept of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Because, and again, relaying it back to what we're doing at Paddle, we are truly doing something that I don't believe anyone's done before. We are building a segment that no one has operated in before. And this has really helped sharpen that sense of I don't know what tomorrow is, and therefore what I've got to do is surround myself with the most intelligent and thought-provoking people that I can, because I trust that if I can get that environment correct, we will figure it out. And so I think it's that kind of, again, self-awareness is probably the words again, to say I don't know everything, and even if I think I do, that's probably incorrect. It's a constant battle. It's a constant reminder that I'm having to set for myself that I still feel very young, thankfully, and I still got a lot to learn. But I also hope it builds more genuine and authentic relationships between me and other people, who people say, well, just because he's had this experience or he has this title, he's still open enough to learn and to get better and to find out more about himself and myself and the world around him. So it's something that's definitely developed over time, and but you know, I've still got a long way to go to continue getting better at it.
Okay, that makes sense. That sounds really great. Do you feel like you factor in this reflection every week, every month? How do you do it in your daily life?
Yeah, I think there are things, so again, if we go back to strategic and tactical, there are tactical initiatives where I will force myself to ask for input, even though I'm convinced I know what the answer is. You know, I think there is something that I know was a personal struggle of mine when I moved from an individual contributor to manager, which was around taking other people along for the journey, that dependency play that we talked about before. Part of that is actually saying, here's what I'm thinking about it, shoot it down, and invite people and create that environment to critique, to you know, offer their opinions, to be objective about it as well. But if I didn't volunteer what I'm currently working on what I'm thinking about, people wouldn't have the opportunity to improve it or to share their feedback. So I think it's about being proactive and collaborative in terms of saying, this is what I'm doing right now. And again, I try and do the same thing for the managers that report into me, to say, let's have a daily stand up and come prepared with the top 3 things that you're thinking about right now. Not for a matter of just updating everyone so that we can say, yeah, that's great, carry on. But hey, do I have an opinion about what you're doing? I'm not a subject matter expert, you know, our solution architect manager. She does a job that I could never dream to do. She is a subject matter expert on implementations and pre-sales engineering, but she may come with an opinion that, or a plan or an objective that she's working on, that I may have something to share about it, or that the AE manager or the SDR manager may have something to share on. So I think it's about really getting comfortable with people giving you that feedback and saying, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm thinking about, but I'm bringing this to you so that you can come with me and say, I think there's a problem, or I think you haven't thought about something else, or have you thought about doing this in this way?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, just break down this idea, this concept that you have, and you know, if your views on it isn't actually the best kind of view, at least you know now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have so many different opinions on what's right and what's wrong, and then you can really break it down, can't you?
100%. I think, again, it comes back to you just keeping yourself in check and saying, I don't know everything, really. And, you know, I deliberately, my job, the way I see my job is to hire people better than me. That's how I will be successful, to hire those subject matter experts who can take a piece of the project and really own it. So why would I be so short-sighted to not ask for their feedback and opinions, right? This is why I've hired them. So that's part of the challenge, is to create that environment where they feel comfortable to do so. But the other part is on me being proactive to say, what do you think? You know, here's what I'm thinking about. What do you think? And you know, be that cascading messages from the executive team, sharing around the strategy, or just planning around how we're going to execute on a specific project. It's all about making sure that you've got the right input and the right level of collaboration with the teams.